Heyo, this is Kat from Kentucky Reptile Zoo, and today while I was cleaning, a few of my snakes had shed their skin. So, I have their sheds, and I was going to tell you a little bit about them. Here on the counter, I have a few different species. Now, the way that snakes grow is that they shed their skin. Their scales are thickened pieces of keratin with actual skin between them, but they're layered very close to each other as a protection, makes them kind of tougher. And so when they shed, the outer layer of the skin and scale comes off. Now this is from a Mang mountain viper, Protobothrops Mang siamensis, and this piece is really torn up. It didn't shed in one whole piece, as you can see. The ideal is for a snake to shed in one entire piece so that there aren't any bits left behind that are stuck to them, especially on their face, because that can make it hard to move, see. It can make them uncomfortable, and then they're stressed. So ideally it'll all come off in one piece. In this case it did all come off, but not in one piece. It came off in shreds, which is fine. He still got it all off. Now the shed can show you a lot about the animal and what it looked like too. So it would be very hard to actually identify. It takes a pretty good expert to look at a shed and know exactly what species it is, but there are some cool physical details that come off with the shed. So you can see, as I stretched it out a bit, you can see the skin that comes between the scales, all that white in between, that's the actual skin. Now in the way that the scales lay together, is they kind of overlap. You can see it especially in these belly scales. They lay together, kind of overlapping slightly. If you pull apart, though, you can see the skin that is actually in between. It's not just open, it does have skin all over its body. Now for this species, they actually have keeled scales, which means there are tiny ridges on all of the scales, and this can be seen if you look really closely. I'm trying to find a few good ones, but you can kind of see on some of them, especially up above my thumb there, they have this ridge in them. That kind of lighter line is an actual texture. So the keel does transfer. The shape of the scale transfers. So yeah, it would come off normally. And this actually did come off in this shape, the one I had. I just tore it so you could see the other side better. And when it comes off, initially, they secrete a mucus when the old skin is ready to be removed and the new skin is developing underneath. There's a buffer layer of sort of mucus that smells really bad, but it's very important because it separates the two from each other so that the snake can go ahead and shed. This has already dried off, so it's kind of like a tissue paper feel to it. But you can see on this puff adder, it's still kind of damp, that darker color. The skin is saturated a bit still because it's got that, and it's actually pretty easy to roll and you don't hear as much of the crinkle. It's a bit muffled by all the moisture in it still, so it's still got that. So this means that this snake shed pretty recently because that mucus helped them to get it off, and if they rub against objects, it can stick to the object so that as they pull, it kind of tacks it in place and anchors it so the snake can keep pulling it off. This one is a puff adder. I didn't say that already. So when they shed, it's kind of like peeling off a sock. So when you're peeling something back, I was trying to show you with my sleeve, but things roll backwards. So if you imagine like rolling your sleeve up and it kind of goes inside out like that, that's what the shed does. But if there's a split, this one had a tear in it already. So you can, what you're looking at is the inside, the inner side of it. The outer layer is what's inside when it comes off. But for snakes with really good contrast patterns, the color comes off as well. So there's some of that pigment in the outer layers even. And you can see the pattern of the puff adder there, which is really cool. This is also keeled, so that's actually easier to see on this one. All those little ridges are textured and make it bumpy. Now, if the snake has some other features to it, you can see that come off in the shed as well if it has to do with their skin or scales. For puff adders, I had posted in a previous video about their noses and how their nostrils are big and round. And they have big round nostrils because they hiss very loudly as a defense, and having big round nostrils means that the sound can resonate better through their nose when they hiss. So you can see that it has a great big nostril there. But, of course, just like the inside of your nose, there is skin in there. And so the layer of skin that lines their giant nostril will also shed and peel. So you can see there's the little inside of their nostril. You can see how big that is. Another thing for all snakes, because they do not have eyelids, they have a clear scale that covers their eye. This eye cap ideally comes off clean with the shed. So that's something we watch out for too, is to make sure they don't get stuck eye caps, because that's not comfortable and we don't want there to be any stress or potential problems with their eye having this kind of scabbed on there. So we make sure their eye caps come off clean. This one did, right? So it looks like a little contact lens there. It's very interesting. There it is. So they can crawl around and not get debris in their eyes. Now for this one is a young snake. So it's gonna have bigger and bigger sheds as it grows, because this outer layer doesn't grow with it, it just gets replaced with a larger layer beneath over time. And shedding isn't just for growing. They can also shed in ways to help them if they are injured, like they have a skin lesion, or if they have external parasites, they can enter shed to help heal that wound or get rid of the parasites there. Maybe it would come off with the outer layer. So there are a lot of good reasons to shed your skin. This one is a black and white spitting cobra. And you can see his eye caps came off too very well. And you can see, as a different species of snake, their scales are different. So this one has really large head plates on it, scales on its head, whereas the puff adder has, oh, there's his chin, or bottom of his head. I don't know if that counts as a chin. But you can see there are small scales on the head of this species. Generally with vipers and pit vipers, that is the case, though the exact placement of these scales varies between species. And then with your elapids, your cobras and mambas and such, they have larger scales on their head, like that. But of course, the exact placement, again, is species dependent. And since this is a black and white spitting cobra, the pattern is sort of black and white spotted. This one has a lot of black in its body. So you can see all the scales are dark, but then there's a couple, like right there, those are clear, because on his body, that's going to be a white spot. So there was no melanin pigment to take off there, and you can see some scales have spots on them, but not all the way on them. Like there's just a spot contained within the individual scale. So yeah, it's pretty neat how the color transfers that way. And I do collect these. I try different things with them, because otherwise we would discard these. We have contributed them for research and things if we're asked to, because it's a efficient use for it and it happens regularly. An adult snake will shed maybe 6 to 8 times in a year, depending on how much food it's eating. A baby will shed more frequently because, just like with human babies, growth is faster as they're young and kind of slows. The difference being, though, that snakes never stop growing. So they will continue to shed all their life. It's just that the pace, the frequency of it happening in a year is slower. But yeah, what I do personally with these is I take them and I laminate them to cards so people can collect them. I guess like trading cards. And I've also tried to incorporate it in some of the jewelry too. So if you are familiar with our online store, you might see this stuff come up from time to time, because I just try to make some arts and crafts with it because it's beautiful. It's a good way to investigate the animal closely without investigating the animal closely if they're venomous. And yeah, I think it's a fun little project to have. So there's some snake sheds. Hope you enjoyed it. And have a good day. Bye.